Hey, welcome to my first Mythic Plus commentary. This is a 17 The Other Side run that I played as a Resto Druid. I'm going to talk about a few things during the commentary. First, I'll talk through some mechanics that are relevant to healing the dungeon or just making the run go more smoothly. I'll talk about some things that are specific to Resto Druid, and I'll also point out my own mistakes and opportunities to improve as a player. That's really my main goal in doing these. So first, I like to pre-hot the tank here. Any hots you put on the tank before the tank enters combat won't generate threat on you, at least for a short while. So it's a good idea to get them pre-hotted, just so they're a little bit safer on pull before they get their mitigation up. I like to focus target this Risen Warlord, as they have an enrage that you want to soothe pretty quickly. I'm also playing the Convoke Legendary, so you saw I immediately convoked and just sent that out for damage. Yeah, my goal is to really convoke on pull, on cooldown, as often as possible. I'm also running Corrine for the first strike buff, trying to just maximize crit and squeeze as much damage as possible into all of my convokes. So the affixes for the week, they are Spiteful, Necrotic, Tyrannical, and Tormented, of course. So we're just cleaning up some of these guys as we go. I tried to roar a bunch of our teammates, but I think I was out of range of everyone, so that was not the best roar. Again, I'm going to place the F-Flow and get the tank slightly pre-hotted. This is a really dangerous pull for the tank. There's a lot of casters. The Shadow Core is big damage. The Death Speaker will also cast a buff called Death's Embrace that will put on one of the mobs. It's going to increase their haste by a lot. That can get spell stolen, so if you're a mage or a shaman, you can purge it. That's a good idea to get rid of that. The frontal, I'm going to back up a little bit here. So this Death Speaker has a nasty frontal that it points at a random party member. You can kind of see it coming out here, this erupting darkness. It's actually really difficult to see, given the purple background of the dungeon, all of the effects that are going off here. It blends in really, really well. So what I like to do is stand fairly close to the pack. Generally, you're not in really big danger here. There's the lotuses that get dropped. You want to dodge those as best you can, but in general, you're not in huge danger standing somewhat close and looking down. But looking down, you can see more clearly where it's pointed. Looks like our mage noticed that it was pointed at them and got out of the way, but that's a scary one. So we're cleaning this up pretty well. I mean, we've spent pretty much all of our kicks. Our Boomy still has their beam. Dropping Ursals to keep them all grouped up. We want to keep these Spiteful away from our teammates. Our tank went ahead and pulled this mini boss, and I noticed that the Spiteful was meleeing our. I'm actually going to back up a little bit. Spiteful's coming for our Warlock. The Warlock noticed as well and hit him with the Mortal Coil to repel and get a little bit of healing. At the same time, I noticed that this Frost Lance was pointed right at me. I wasn't sure. I actually didn't check the cast bar to see how much time I had to get away, so I soul shaped out. I ended up cleaving a little bit on this Biting Cold that's on our Druid, so it's a good idea to avoid that as best you can. So now I'm ramping on our Druid. They're taking a decent amount of damage from that. And here I kind of get myself into a bad spot and get hit by the swirlies. So just putting more healing on the Druid. They got targeted again. And they had no bark skin this time around, so they were going to take a fair amount of damage. Our Warlock gets it and uses Death's Embrace. Gives them a big absorb shield. It's in general, you want to be looking at to see who's getting this and either giving them an external if they don't have, or in this case, we're kind of wrapping up and no one's in any huge danger and can just keep folks up that way. I always like to get the Satchel of the Hunt power here. The speed boost for allies is really helpful, especially on the last boss or really everywhere in the dungeon. Just helps speed things up. So here I'm counting down to time the urn. I want to make sure that 1 tick of rage goes off and then the urn cast goes out. This should prevent the enraged spirit from casting rage again. Though sometimes the spell queuing is a bit weird, but so we're just here cleaning this one up. This was one mistake that I ended up making, is this enraged spirit doesn't quite die, and I ended up greeting my bark skin. I should have used this. Our mage was good and used their alter time. I think our Boomy ends up using bark skin as well after taking a couple ticks of damage. Warlock uses Dark Pact again, or I forget what the spell is called, the shield ability. And I just ate it. I think I ended up using a Swift Mend on myself just to keep me topped up, but just a minor thing here. Especially on fortified keys, you're going to want to be using your personals. If any amount of rage is going off more than a tick or two, you're in big danger, so definitely be using defenses here. I'm kind of just futzing with the shade. We're stuck in combat, so I use a Stampeding Roar just so we can kind of more quickly get down to this pack. I'm in Discord with the tank and Warlock. The tank calls out that they're just going to pull everything. Our Druid mentioned that they have CDs up, so we're thinking we're just going to pull everything and blast, just because it's Tyrannical week and it should be fairly safe to do so. So our tank's running out of shield block charges. They're going to pop Ignore Pain, and that's going to get eaten through pretty quickly. So I end up popping Bark Skin on them. Just trying to make sure that they can stand in tank for as long as possible. But at this point, they're starting to get a lot of necrotic stacks, and they need to start getting away. I dropped the worst Ursals here. This is kind of crazy. I was trying to place it out here, and then backing up, my camera ends up clipping into the wall here, and my targeting swapped here at the last second. Just another reason to move less if possible. Here I saw this shade. Actually, out of the corner of my eye, I saw my Warlock get chunked, and I kind of noticed the shade walking to them at the same time. So you just want to be ready to be on defense there and push them away if possible. Ideally, your casters should just stand and cast if they can. You want them to maximize damage, so it's good for you to do everything you can to help that out. We end up going in here and just pulling the mini-boss. Our goal is to just do a lap around the outside and get all of the powers. So this guy, his aura is a healing reduction aura, and he does this targeted ability where he will put a nasty bleed on whoever he ends up targeting. He also does this fear cast, an AoE fear cast, where he's doing it right now. I think he did it once before already. If you're not standing close by someone in your group, then you'll get feared, and that does a little bit of damage to everyone as well. He also puts a pretty nasty bleed on the tank, which I am unfortunately not tracking. I need to update my unit frames to track that, because that can be a lot of damage, and if the tank doesn't have some absorb shield up or some other mitigation, it's pretty easy to fall behind. I pretty much always take the Mana Orb's power as a healer. Yeah, it's just nice to really not have to worry about drinking for the entire dungeon. We get stuck with a slightly bad patrol, so we're kind of just waiting for this guy to get a little closer. I think we waste maybe 15 or so seconds. It's kind of unfortunate, but we weren't really confident that we could do more than just this one guy. So for this one, our Warlock, I think our Warlock ends up using a cooldown. Warlock and the Mage. Yeah, so healing these when you can't prevent the rage. I actually don't do the best job on this one, but in general, you want to be looking at all of your teammates, checking to see who has personals. In this case, everyone has personals. Mage has barrier up, a little bit of barrier left, and an ice block. You want to start putting out rejuves, and then cast the wild growth to just be healing folks up as the damage is going out. And ideally, the wild growth lands right after the rage cast starts. And then you can go into using a flourish or some other healing cooldown. So in this case, I opt for flourish. And again, I make the mistake of not using my bark skin. This is kind of a bad habit I'm in right now, but it ends up proccing my frenzied regen conduit, which gives me a huge healing buff, and ends up healing me for a huge amount. So this guy, he does pulsing party damage. He puts out these magic debuffs that increase fire damage. Does this targeted fire ability, which ends up denying a fair amount of area over time. And then also ends up casting this spell that needs to get kicked, otherwise it does a huge amount of fire damage to the entire party. Our tank has this macro where he can mouse over party frames and it'll say who gets the next interrupt. So using this to kind of coordinate kicks and pugs has actually been really, really helpful. So this guy's pretty tough. Honestly, in hierarchies, I should definitely be using a healing cooldown. Also, our DPS are all sandbagging right here. They've basically used all their cooldowns, so they're saving for, in this case, this guy's saving CA for this next pack. Everyone knows this next pack is coming. So we had pretty low damage. It took a long time. I think in hierarchies, you're going to want to treat it kind of like prideful. Assign a DPS cooldown. Definitely have a healing cooldown ready, if not two. He's definitely one of the scarier of the new mini bosses in Tormented. So again, standing kind of close, seeing where the frontal's going for the Death Speaker. Death Speaker is pretty much dying here, so I don't really worry too much about the next frontal, so I don't think there will be one. And we just clean this pack up. Just kind of blast. So now we head into Ardenweald. We get through the boss in this hall. And now we're going to we actually got kind of lucky with this patrol. We got a pretty good sized pull here. This Convoke Legendary, it kind of owns being able to convoke pretty much every pull is pretty great. And you get moons really often, maybe every other convoke or so. So I'm actually really enjoying it. Now I'm just here padding. kind of wild charge away just to disengage and get a little more space. We've pretty much used all of our CC at this point, but the pull's pretty much over. We're more or less safe. Just kind of cleaning up these guys. Honestly, we should, yeah. So our tank goes in and pulls Soggodon. So this guy, he increases physical damage taken by 50%. He does this AoE slam. He sucks everyone in and roots you, and so you have to break through the roots, or as a druid, you just shapeshift and get out. And then he does the smash. It's like a big swirly around him that is pretty much going to one-shot everyone that's in it. So it's definitely important to get out. I find him to be very easy. And honestly, we should probably have skipped him because the last boss in DoS doesn't really do that much physical damage, just melees the tank occasionally, but most of the damage that's going out is magic damage. So again, how Tormented works is all of the guys that you end up killing, they give you a power, but if you don't kill them, you A, miss the power, and B, have to deal with the aura that's present during the mini-boss while you fight the last boss of the dungeon. So in this case, this guy has the increased physical damage aura, and so he's going to give us increased physical damage taken during the last boss. So in most cases, you'll probably want to avoid those, but in a case like this one, where the last boss isn't really doing that much physical damage, it's probably better to skip them. You just save the time. Or something like Halls of Atonement, where all the physical damage is going to one-shot you anyway, so you might as well. You're dodging all of the statues. You might as well skip this guy and just keep dodging statues. Just don't even take the damage. So we're gonna pull the urn next. So this is another case where I like to, as a Resto Druid, just pre-hot the tank. There's going to be a pretty long period of time where I'm not able to heal the tank as he's gathering the mobs, so I just want to get all the hots out on the tank beforehand. I get into position here, and then this is something you have to be careful of. Our other druid friend stands over here. There's a 3-pack of stealth mobs right here that he ends up aggroing. It ends up really kind of messing him up. He has some pretty good instincts. He bark skins and uses a rejuve and swift mend on himself just to kind of save himself. I think he hit maybe health stones or health pots as well. Our tank also did a good job of getting in there and getting threat on all these guys to save the druid. But I'm casting the urn and then just going into DPS mode. We really just want to burn through this pack as quickly as possible. So we drop trees. Our mage gets some threat and starts getting meleeed by maybe a shade or I'm not exactly sure. Typhoon, drop Ursals. Our tank had used his Spirit Bastion. So now we're just cleaning up these Spitefuls. There's maybe 1 bird or 2 birds left, but we're mostly just cleaning up the shades so we can move on. So for these, the hatchling is one of the scariest mobs in this dungeon, in that it doesn't have a lot of HP, but it has this cast, this Frightened Cries cast, that you can't kick, but you can stun to interrupt it. But if that goes off, it's going to get all of these birds. They're all going to come, all the matriarchs. It's going to get the birds up top. It's going to get birds down here. They're all going to come, and they're all going to enrage, and they're going to fuck your tank up. So you definitely want to be interrupting this guy, stunning him, making sure that cast isn't going off. That's super important. One other thing I want to talk about here, so I have only a few seconds left on my first strike buff. I also see that I have 4 seconds left on my Convoke cooldown. So I actually haven't damaged this guy at all. I'm waiting for this cooldown to to be ready. I'm gonna hit him with a Moonfire or something, and then get that first strike buff again, and then send the Convoke. I think I spent the time just getting some hots on the tank instead, and once we're ready there, do some damage and just send the Convoke. Yeah, one thing I've noticed that, I mean, part of this is I'm learning this new legendary and trying to be as offensive as possible. It's also kind of a lower key, so the healing requirement isn't that high, and my tank, I know my tank is going to do a good job of managing his damage taken. But I'm definitely spending way less time focused on healing with this legendary, and so that's one thing I should be more mindful of. Hasn't really been a problem yet, but I could definitely see how that could become a problem in higher keys, especially on fortified keys, where some of these pulls, the trash is going to do so much damage to the tank. You really have to be careful. We got lucky with this patrol as well, so we get them all grouped up and people can just start doing damage right away. This Elder Horn drops these swirlies, so you just want to be dodging those. Normally they do a good chunk of damage. I'm sure someone will get hit, or myself, at some point. On fortified keys, they're going to do maybe half your HP or 2/3 of your HP. And then what you really have to be careful for is on like raging weeks, when that guy's raging, it's going to one-shot you. So you have to be careful of those. So this is just cleanup, kind of padding. I think our Warlock was building resources, so we just roar down. So this boss, I make a couple of big mistakes on, so we'll talk about those. But yeah, here I am in DPS mindset, just getting into an Eclipse, sending the Convoke. And so far, it's kind of going pretty well. I have the lightning debuff. The way this guy works, if you don't know, it drops these jump pads where if you walk over them, they will launch you in the air. She puts out this lightning that deals damage and gives you this arcane vulnerability debuff that stacks, that increases the damage you take from the lightning even more. It also does 2 casts that are an explosive contrivance and a localized explosive contrivance. So this was the mistake, actually. So they had casted the... let me back up a little bit more. Casted the explosive contrivance, or localized explosive contrivance. It went out on our mage, I believe. Yeah, our mage. So our mage has to hit one of these jump pads, get up in the air. They were a little late. It was a little scary. But here, I ended up walking over my jump pad. And this is a problem because the order of these is localized contrivance, then explosive contrivance that damages the whole group. So on the localized cast, only the person with the debuff needs to take the jump pad. On the global cast, everyone needs to take a jump pad in order to avoid the damage. And there are only as many jump pads as there are players in the fight. So if you do what I did and walk over your jump pad and take it early, then you won't have one for the cast of the explosive contrivance. So what I do is I Ironbark, Barkskin, go Bear Form. I made another mistake here in being too close to my Warlock. I should have walked way over here to be away from this arcane vulnerability debuff. So that was scary. But basically it goes off, I'm now super low. I'm doing everything in my power to keep myself alive. Luckily we stabilize. Yeah, this boss fight, I definitely have the lowest DPS out of all the boss fights, out of all of the pulls. This one's pretty hard to heal through, especially when the lightning is bouncing around. I end up using a Resto Convoke, which I really don't want to do, and I get lucky in that it casts Flourish. Also, our booming gives me Innervate, so I get some free casts off there. So at this point, I'm going to give the debuff to my Warlock. I see that he has Unending Resolve, he has Dark Pact, he has everything he needs to live it, so I give to him. I needed, again, to be farther away. I had just given it to him, and I was too close, so I ended up getting it again. On an 18, anything higher than this, I'm dead, right? Like, I'm already pretty low HP. The contrivance is about to go off. I see there's a few seconds left on this. I should have just gotten as far away as possible. I insta health pot and health stone to top myself. Yeah, that boss was scary. Alright, we have a lot of running. Just skipping ahead. Our Warlock ends up cooldowning this guy. We're all just blasting, just trying to kill this thing as fast as possible. Especially on fortified keys, these mobs are really, really slow. I think a lot of teams opt to skip, especially just this first one. It's sometimes you can pull it and this headless client that's kind of over here. You can pull them together and clear a couple things out at once, but you're pretty much stuck killing that thing, and it's really slow. So these guys, the headless clients, spin up. They have this move where they're going to spin and deal a lot of AoE damage around them, so you want to make sure that you're getting out or stunning them. The dog mob, Arf, has this targeted ability that's going to stun a player and anyone that's within the AoE. They also have this tank buster ability, Metallic Jaws, that's going to deal big damage to the tank, so you want to be looking out for that and making sure if your tank has no mitigation or tools available, you can give them Iron Bark or something to help prop them up. So one thing we end up doing for this pull is it's another one of these drills. It's really slow. Our tank pulls in one of the lubricators. See a lot of teams will end up pulling. Each of these lubricators one at a time, and that's also very slow. They're not as bad as the drills in terms of HP and the need to line of sight during a dangerous cast, but they still take a long time to kill if you pull them individually. And our team comp, it has no melee DPS kick. We have a really long, two long kind of normal caster kicks, and then Boomy's Solar Beam, which is 1 minute cooldown, really long kick. So we don't really want to pull two of these at a time. So instead we opt to pull this guy in here so we can just kick, and we're all good there. I'm gonna kind of fast forward through a lot of this stuff. It's pretty uneventful. Just kill this lubricator, kick as much as we can. Again here, this pack is pretty dangerous. So all of these guys are casting this Essential Oil spell, and it's going to be targeted on a random party member. In this case, it's being targeted on our tank, but a lot of these are going to get targeted on, like in this case, the Boomy and the Mage, and it does a fair amount of damage. You see that one chunked our Mage down. It did maybe 20-30% of their HP. On fortified weeks, these guys are pretty dangerous, so you want to use kicks and AoE stops. And if you're a caster, you can stand back by this corner and line of sight a lot of the casts. So it's really good as Resto Druid since basically everything you have is instant cast. Or at least most of your main spells are going to be instant cast. You can just kind of duck behind that corner whenever you need to. But that's a good idea. If you're going to die, you're better off losing some DPS and getting around that corner to live than trying to keep DPSing and just dying. So on this boss, there's two bosses, right? There's Millhouse and Maleficent. I think that's what her name is. This guy, he frostbolts. We want to kick that as much as possible. He also summons these little towers that shoot a beam into him, and if the beam hits him, then it does pulsing party damage. If you soak the beam, then you take a little bit of damage, but you also get a damage buff, so it's actually very good to soak the beam for your damage. And then eventually he will cast, as this is going on, the other boss is casting this targeted ability. You've probably seen it a couple times now, where two people end up getting targeted, in this case the Boomy and the Warlock, and it shoots this line through and it's going to stun and deal damage to everyone that's in it. So you can actually use this to stun the boss. That's definitely worth doing. In this case, we all kind of AFK while the Diabolical Doom is going out, and we end up really tunnel visioning on landing the stun, which is very important to do here. And we don't soak this beam, and you can see that just a couple ticks brought our party down to very, very low HP. Let me just back it up so you can watch one more time. Very dangerous. You definitely want to be soaking those beams. And so this boss has a Buzzsaw, it's a tank buster. It also spawned these bombs. Usually it's the healer's job to take care of the bombs, so everyone can just keep DPSing. One trick is trying to stand as close as you can to the boss, and then just spam clicking on our tank dipped really low there. And just spam clicking the boss, and oftentimes you can, like I did there, just click the bomb as it's going out, and that works pretty well. The other thing that's happening is the other boss is casting this this targeted ability called Shadow Fury that is going to be AoE damage and stun. And this is another one where you can use this on the boss herself, and that's definitely worth doing. Deal some damage, it's going to stun. You just want to make sure that you get out of it. Like right now our druid is being targeted. You can see the circle around them, little arrow over their head. And they stand just so that the circle hits the boss and ends up stunning the boss. So we end up making another mistake here. A couple things. One, I should have ramped more on this cast, the Arterial Chicken Barrage. This is big party-wide damage, so it's very dangerous. Also, a couple rough things happened here. One, our mage got targeted by the Shadow Fury, so they were going to take some damage. Two, right after the Shadow Fury goes out, they also end up getting hit by a Frostbolt. You can actually see the Frostbolt on them, I believe. Or maybe it's just the Shadow Fury. They get hit by the Shadow Fury, and then immediately take a bunch of damage from the barrage as well. I should have noticed that, and I actually didn't have Iron Bark up. I guess I could have pre-hotted more aggressively. I actually had no instant cast cooldowns. I don't think there was anything I could do to keep the mage alive. They died in like a second. Yeah, they're just dead. I think they had to use Ice Block there. Our druid ends up B-resing. We get back to it. Yeah, the rest of this boss is not that exciting. We miss soaking a bunch of times and have a couple close calls, but overall, not a lot to talk about here. More running. So in this hall, there's a couple interesting mobs. One are these devoted mobs. They cast this sacrifice spell that if it goes off, they'll turn into Sons of Hakkar. They're these mobs that will just fixate random players, and they do a pulsing AoE damage that increases progressively. And then when they die, they drop this big puddle of blood that does damage to anyone standing in it. You'll also see these mobs during the Hakkar boss fight, so you want to avoid them as much as possible in here. They're dangerous and they're a big time sink. The Hexers are another really important mob. They have a heal spell that has to get kicked. They are a lieutenant type mob, so you can't knock them or stun them. So you have to kick the spell. They also will polymorph and put out this chain lightning ability. Ideally, you kick those as well, but in Pugs, really the most important thing is making sure that the heal gets kicked, because it's a huge heal. It's like hundreds of thousands of HP that it heals. That has to get kicked. The Deathwalkers, when they die, they turn into a spirit that has this buff that makes them invulnerable, and they do a ton of damage. There, they just one-shot our mage. When the buff expires, they die, so all you have to do is stay away from them while they're around. If you have a hunter or shaman in your group, you can purge that buff and they'll die immediately. Mages can also spell steal it, but when the buff expires from them, they will also die, so it's not really worth doing. So more Sons of Hakkar. We killed them. We basically just coordinating stuns and kicks and Typhoon and everything to make sure that none of these casts go off while we're killing them. On Tyrannical, they die pretty fast, but on Fortified, especially higher keys, they're going to take a while to kill. So here we get the urn pull. So basically what we do here is our tank is hotted, they pull the pack and jump away, just so the casters run in as well. So otherwise they'll just stand back and smite. So then we get them all grouped up. We can do big cleave. I get a lucky moon, feels good. So these Deathwalkers, before they become a spirit, they put a bleed on the tank or whoever they're aggroed on, and they will occasionally spin and deal big AoE damage. Melee are in big danger when this is happening, so you want to make sure that you're looking for that and getting out if you can. Or as a druid, you can push them and knock them back just to give your DPS some space. We lose a little bit of time here. So this boss got nerfed big time in 9.1. It's a lot easier now. But it can be a tricky boss, especially if people aren't killing the ads. It's still going to get fairly big barriers, and the ads do a lot of damage with the pulsing party damage. So these are the Sons of Hakkar. Their Blood Novas come out. So my goal here is to do as much damage as possible. I end up holding Heart of the Wild just because I know that the final boss is coming up, and the tank and I are going to have to kill one of those shades, so I want to make sure that we have plenty of DPS for that. But these blood barriers, you can see they're starting to really chunk our team. We're in pretty big danger right now. I'm looking down to see how much space I need to get out of the blood puddle. I saw that my HP was pretty high, but I'm still fairly concerned. I sent another DPS Convoke. A couple things to look at here. There's some kind of general principles that are worth talking about here. One is deciding when you have to heal your teammates versus when you can be dealing damage. So one thing I notice is that out of the corner of my eye, I see my mage get chunked. I see they're standing in their Rune of Power. I see there's a few bloods that are heading their way. I also see them start to move. At this point, there's really not much I could do. I guess I could Swift Mend into Regrowth to give them a bit more HP, but if they're just going to stand there, they're probably going to die. And so I trust that they're going to get out. They do. I know that ads aren't coming for a short while. So instead, I opt to Convoke offensively. I know I can get into an Eclipse, Convoke before the ads come out, which is going to put all of the damage into the boss, which is where I want all the damage to go. Then I can start healing the mage. But getting this Convoke out and getting the damage into the boss while only the boss is available is really what I want to be doing here. Also, got kind of lucky in that a single retrieve went out. I also think our mage probably used Health Pod or Health Stone. Yeah, this fight ends up being kind of chaos. So I know these last sets of ads, there's going to be a lot of them. Basically, every time the ad spawn, you get more ads than last time. They're all going to be casting Blood Nova and getting stacks. They're going to be dealing a ton of damage to the party. Everyone's taking damage, huge damage. So I end up just ramping on everyone, getting out the wild growth, and then hitting Flourish. This ends up doing just huge party-wide healing, and then I'm just spamming regrowths to keep everyone safe. And now we're just cleaning up. Pretty easy. Kind of assigning positions for this boss fight. Just getting into position here. I end up drinking for the first time this dungeon just to top up my mana. That one fight, that boss fight, is a pretty tough one in terms of mana. So this boss has a couple of things. One, puts out these debuffs that are going to do a little bit of dot damage and then a big chunk of damage when they expire. They then also drop these these orbs, which will eventually detonate and deal damage in these areas here. While that's all happening, there's this cast, Master of Death, that will cast big area denial on either the front half of the platform, the right side of the platform, or the left side of the platform. You can tell based on the animation where it's going to end up going. So you have to dodge that. That is pretty much going to one-shot. So pretty much just avoiding all of these, healing people up. It's really everyone's job to be dodging all of this damage while dealing damage, and the damage you deal in this phase is not terribly important because the next thing that happens is we get Shattered Reality. We've assigned all the locations where people will end up going, go through these portals, and then you have to kill a shade and click on this totem. So here our goal is to just do as much damage as possible. We have a fairly limited amount of time to kill the shade, and then we'll be able to click on the totem. We want to try to avoid all of these as much as possible. They deal a lot of damage, so we really want to be dodging them if we can. I think our mage ends up not killing their shade in time. So we have one totem that's still alive up here. So now we're just dealing damage to the boss, waiting for the next Shatter Reality cast. I'm gonna skip ahead a bunch of this. It's not very basically just trying to deal as much damage as we can and dodge all the things. Nothing very exciting. We cruise on over here. Now with all of us here, this shade's gonna die in no time at all. It's very easy. Unfortunately, our mage gets hit by all of those and ends up dying. It's very easy to do, especially with all. I think the number of orbs that spawn are proportional to the number of players on the platform. So with all of us there, there was very little available space to play. So it's a very easy mistake to make. And now we're running a little short on time. I mean, we have a couple minutes left, but at this point we have to get the boss down to 10.5% HP, and then we win. So win conditions very clear. At this point, it's just don't wipe, and we time the key. I end up with just enough time to fit in 2 convokes, just a pad. I don't end up doing a ton of damage on this fight. There's a decent amount of group healing, so I'm kind of stuck doing healing most of the time. But yeah, this is the 17 DoS Tyrannical as Resto Druid. Yeah, let me know if this is like helpful or interesting, or if there's any kind of related types of content that you'd be interested in. I'd love to do some of these that are maybe this one felt really general. Like I'd love to do some of these that are maybe like a little more prepared, or they end up being more focused on Resto Druid specifically or healing specifically. This one was like a mix of talking about the dungeon and talking about Resto Druid and talking about healing, and there's a lot packed in there, and I definitely missed a lot of things. So yeah, let me know in the comments if there's anything that's more interesting or that you'd like to end up seeing. So yeah, thanks for watching, and take care. We'll see you next time.